What up, IB in the building, and we back for another video, and I'm back with another team breakdown, and this is going to be my first playoff team that I do a team breakdown for, and that playoff team is the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, the 76ers are a very polarizing team in terms of what opinion you have on them, in terms of how good you actually think. A lot of people think the 76ers are the best team in the East. A lot of them think they're not even a top 4 team in the East. But that's just an example of the polarization that the 76ers provide. So let's break them down. Team state, they were 39-26 at the time of suspension of the season, which put them at tied for 5th in the East. I believe they were tied with the Indiana Pacers for 5th. A lot of that has to do with the addition of Al Horford not going to plan, and Joel Embiid being injured, and when he's been healthy, sometimes he just isn't consistently playing at full effort sometimes, it appears, but we'll dive into that later. Let's start by breaking down the players separately. We'll start off with the process himself, Joel Embiid. This year he averaged 23.4 points per game, 11.8 rebounds, 1.3 blocks, and 47% from the field. All of those 4 base statistics are down from last year. However, he shot 34.8% from 3, which is up from last year. He's shooting a higher percentage from 3 this year than he did last year. Strengths of Joel Embiid: shot creation. He's one of the best low post scorers in the entire league. He's virtually unstoppable when he gets a one-on-one matchup in the post. Tremendously skilled. He has basically all the moves in the post that you would want your big man to have. From 3 to 10 feet, which is basically your post-up range, he shoots 47.3% from the field, which is a good percentage. On defense, he is a great rim protector. Even though his block shot numbers are down, the advanced metrics favor him. He's 12th best in defensive rating, putting him behind basically the entire Bucks team, because in defensive rating, the whole Bucks starting 5 is like in the top 10 of defensive rating, but Joel Embiid is right up there at 12th. And Joel Embiid has Defensive Player of the Year type of defensive potential with his rim protecting ability, and he shows a decent ability to guard switches in a pick and roll. And he's also a great shooter for a center. We've seen that ever since his rookie year, his ability to basically score on all 3 levels, inside, mid-range, and outside. But it seems this year he's taken his efficiency to a whole nother level, shooting 34.8% from 3, like I said, which is really good for a center. Now let's talk about weaknesses. Number 1 weakness is his durability. I mean, I don't think he's played more than 60 games in a season, and that's going to really hold him back, not only this year, but in his entire career, as those injuries keep on piling up on one another. Is his prime going to be cut short? Is he going to be basically not the Joel Embiid that we've seen for all of his career? Is he really going to start tailing off and regressing at the age of 32 or something like that? He's also had a problem with conditioning. I think this year he didn't come into the season in the best of shape, which doesn't allow him to play your typical superstar minutes at 34, 35, 36 minutes a game. But he is a bigger body. He's a 7-foot center. But yeah, conditioning is a problem for him. And probably the biggest, most talked about weakness, and it's not even Joel Embiid's fault, but it's his fit with Ben Simmons. Now, we'll talk about Ben Simmons further when I get to him, but Ben Simmons, being the type of player he is, a player who is afraid to take a 3. He's only taken, I think, like 8 threes in his entire career. 75% of those are just full court heaves. When you have that type of player who thrives inside and doesn't want to take a 3, that kind of negates the value of having Joel Embiid, who's another player who thrives inside, who thrives in a post-up, slow down tempo, get the ball on the block and let him work with spacing around him. That's the type of environment that Joel Embiid thrives in, and Ben Simmons is not the ideal player to have. Type of player as in game-wise, what he does, what he brings, and what he doesn't bring. Ben Simmons cannot provide spacing for Joel Embiid when they're on the floor together, so it's kind of harder for him to post up because any defender can just help off of Ben Simmons if he's on the perimeter and try to cut at Joel Embiid, or not even the defender of Ben Simmons, somebody near side of Joel Embiid can dig down on Joel Embiid and everybody can rotate off of Ben Simmons. So it kind of makes it a lot tougher for Joel Embiid to go to work in the post because he has to go quicker before the double team comes. And I think teams really doubled down on that this year, which is why Joel Embiid's scoring is down this year and his efficiency is down this year, and he's been forced to take more threes to kind of adhere to Ben Simmons' limitations. I was going to say limitabilities, what the hell? Limitations. His mid-range shooting is down, like percentage-wise. If we take a look at his shot selection, and this is partly or mainly because of Ben Simmons' limitations, only 24.8% of his attempts come from 0 to 3 feet, which is your at the rim range. At Joel Embiid's size and skill, he should have a lot higher of a percentage of those shots coming out the basket. This is why Shaq and Charles Barkley get on Joel Embiid about him being too cute and playing outside like a guard too much. When you're as big as Joel Embiid and as skilled as Joel Embiid, I think at least 40% in this NBA, considering the emphasis on spacing and threes, in this NBA, at least 40% of Joel Embiid's shots should come from 0 to 3 feet. Because he converts them at a 71.8% rate. He shoots 71.8% from the field at 0 to 3 feet. So when he gets inside, he's virtually unstoppable. But like I said, it's harder for him to get those types of shots because most of his minutes come with Ben Simmons on the court with him. Over half of his shots, 52.2% of his shot attempts, come between 3 feet and the 3-point line. So not at the rim. And he's settling for way too many mid-range attempts, and when they're not mid-range attempts, it's 3-point attempts. So basically his shooting splits are 25% at the rim, 52% short mid-range to long mid-range, and then he shoots 25% of his shot attempts from 3. You're not getting the most value out of Joel Embiid by having him settle for mid-range jump shots and requiring him to be a stretch 5 because of Ben Simmons' limitations. And this is a theory that I've heard through Max Kellerman, believe it or not, and he was the first guy that suggested it, or the first guy that I heard suggested this. And it's the fact that maybe he's settling for mid-range attempts and 3-point shots because he wants to preserve himself in terms of he doesn't want to get injured, and he wants to be conditioned for when those meaningful games come out or come on in the playoffs. Maybe that's true, but there's no validity to that as of yet. Joel Embiid hasn't said anything of the sort. So I think he's just gotta try his best to... Brett Brown, the coach, has to try his best to get the most value out of Joel Embiid by having him shoot the shots that he's most efficient at shooting. And another weakness of Joel Embiid's game is not even his game, actually. It's his the mental game of basketball. He is very inconsistent. There'll be like a week or two stretch where he'll look like he's an MVP candidate of the league, and then there'll be like a game or two that'll come after that where he just looks like he's okay with being a stretch 5 and doesn't want the ball inside. Maybe that's partly due to him preserving himself or his lack of conditioning over an 82 game season, but the man has to get consistent somewhat. He's got to be able to string together maybe a month span of just dominance, and then after that he shouldn't fall off to a 2-point performance against Toronto. No way, he didn't even score in that game against Toronto. Like, that's the type of things that really a lot of fans don't like about Embiid, because he talks his shit and then he's not consistent with his game. He's a consistent talker, but his game isn't as consistent as him talking. And when you go out and put up an entire donut in 30 minutes of play as what a lot of people view you as possibly a top 10 player in this league, that's going to rub people the wrong way. So yeah, he's got to work on the mental approach of basketball, being more consistent. Now let's move to his dynamic duo partner in Ben Simmons. This year he's averaging 17 points per game, 8 boards and 8 assists, 2.1 steals per game on 58.5% shooting. Now let's talk about his strengths. Just looking at him, the strengths are obvious. His size, his speed, athleticism, all in somebody who's 6'11", like 230, 240 pounds. He's in that LeBron James type of mold. A big body wing player that moves at the side. He's not even wing player size. He's damn near center size. He's basically 6'10", 6'11", but he can move like a guard. He's gonna be the most athletic player on the court 90% of the time. That alone, those physical gifts allow him to be what Ben Simmons is today. 17, 8, and 8 on efficient shooting from the field. Court vision, obvious. 8 assists per game. He's great in the open court in terms of whether he goes coast to coast by his lonesome due to his size and just finishes over a defender, or those Lonzo, LeBron, Kevin Love type of full court passes, or him just running the fast break regularly, taking it up the middle of the floor, spotting the open man. Ben Simmons is a player who thrives in the open floor and at a faster tempo. Also, his finishing ability is another plus for him due to his size. 64% of his attempts come from 0 to 3 feet, and he shoots 72% from that range. So when he gets to the rim, he finishes more often than not. Great rebounder. Obviously, him being 6'10" and athletic as hell is going to help him rebounding and defense. This year, Ben Simmons, he was on pace to be an all-NBA first team type of defender. He gets off-ball steals in the passing lane due to his size and wingspan and quickness and instinct. And on ball, he is almost impossible to get around because he's so quick and so strong. It's not even fair to have that amount of speed and quickness in that amount of size. That combination of speed and size is just unfair. And that combination of speed and size allows him to be one of the few players that can actually guard all 5 positions, 1 through 5, on the court on any given night. So he has a lot of switchability. He can switch through screens on basically whoever sets the screen, he can switch onto it, the big man or the small. Having said all of that, Ben Simmons obviously is not without his fair share of weaknesses. His half-court offense is kind of average due to his inability to shoot threes and create shots in general when he's not just rim running and trying to get to the hole. He doesn't really have a pull-up mid-range off of a pick and roll. You can't really, like I said, he can't shoot threes. Yeah, so his shot creation in half-court type of setting kind of suffers, and his aggression is also a bit lackluster, again, in the half-court setting. Due to his inability to create a shot, he kind of just becomes a player who just sits in the dunker spot and waiting for somebody else to break down the defense, or he gets an offensive rebound and puts it up, or he stands in the dunker spot waiting for a lob. Basically, his entire weakness is his half-court offense. And like I said, Joel Embiid having a weakness for fitting with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons having a weakness for fitting with Joel Embiid is another weakness. Like I said, Joel Embiid is a type of player who thrives he thrives in the half-court. Joel Embiid is a player who thrives in the half-court, able to create his own shot in the post one-on-one, while Ben Simmons is a player who does not thrive in the half-court. He thrives at a faster pace in the open floor, where he can run in 2-on-3, 3-on-3 type of fast break settings to use his size in the open floor. They're basically yin and yang, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, and I'm not just saying that because of their skin tone contrast. Their games are basically polar opposites. But I do think there are ways that they can work around that in order to thrive on the court together, and a lot of that comes down to coaching, and we'll get to coaching later on. Next player to break down is Tobias Harris. Now, he's scoring 19 points a game, 7 boards, 3 assists on 47% from the field and 36% from 3. Strengths for Tobias Harris: shooting. His shooting percentage from 3 is down this year, but basically over the past 5 years, he's consistently shot at around 39% from 3. And Tobias Harris has the reputation as a knockdown shooter, so even though his shooting is a bit down this year, nobody's going to want to leave him open because he's that lethal. I think last year he shot an upwards of 40% from 3, so that goes to show you. He's a good shot creator, which is a good reason to have Tobias Harris on the court next to Ben Simmons, because they kind of cover for each other, while Ben Simmons can't really create for himself in the half court as your typical shot creator. Tobias Harris can do that at a good rate. He's not the best shot creator in the league, but he can create for himself. He has a solid post game, and he thrives in the mid-range. either on an ISO situation or in a pick and roll situation on the wing. From 3 to 10 feet, 22% of his field goal attempts come from there, and he's shooting at a good rate of 49.8% from the field. From 10 to 16 feet, 16% of his field goal attempts come from there, and he's shooting 46.3% from the field, which goes to show you how much he thrives in the mid-range off of his own creation, either in the post or in the ISO or pick and roll setting. And he also converts at the rim, shooting 66.2% from the field from 0 to 3 feet. Also, his passing has gotten better this year. He's never has and never will be known as a great passer, but his assists per game have jumped, or not jumped, they've taken a tiny step up to 3.2 assists per game. He's doing that at roughly a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which isn't bad. Weaknesses: Tobias Harris is horrible. He's not horrible, but he is bad at defending small forwards on the perimeter, and he's bad at defending on the perimeter in general. He's mediocre at defending power forwards, which we'll get to later. And this isn't a weakness, this is more of a question. Can he be a go-to shot creator on the perimeter while Ben Simmons can't? I don't know. I think we kind of saw last year in the playoffs, Jimmy Butler was that in the playoffs for the 76ers, and even that isn't really ideal, but he was able to do it at a, not efficient, but he was a good enough shot creator to get them to a Game 7 with the defending NBA champions, where it took a miracle shot from Kawhi Leonard to knock him out of the playoffs. I don't think I don't think Tobias Harris is the type of go-to guy like Jimmy Butler to be the go-to shot creator on the perimeter, but we'll have to see in the playoffs if he can take his offensive game to a whole nother level with Jimmy Butler not on the team this playoff run. So I've talked about their core three. I say Tobias is a part of their core three because of his gigantic contract. Like, he's going to be on the 76ers team for a minute. I don't see anybody trying to trade for Tobias Harris. Now let's talk about players I view as role players for the 76ers. Now let's start with Al Horford. Another player, got that gargantuan contract this summer. This year he's averaging 12 points a game, 4 assists per game, 7 boards. He's shooting 33.7% from 3, which is down from last year, and he's shooting 44.2% from the field. Now, let's talk about some of his strengths. Al Horford has always been a very good to great low post defender, and he's also solid on switches. He's never really going to be that dynamic rim protector, but he's just your solid low post defender, does all the right things, all the right switches, good communicator on defense. He's an all-around solid defender. He's also a great passer, averaging 4 assists per game as a big is pretty crazy. He has those Draymond Green type of passes where he's on the elbow and there's an off-ball cut in the half-court offense, and he's able to spot the open man more often than not. He's also a great finisher at the rim. He shoots an astronomical 76.3% inside the 3 feet. He's a good shooter for a big, 44% from 10 to 16 feet, 41% from 16 to 3-point line, and 33.7% from 3. However, weaknesses: Al Horford just isn't the same player that he was 1 to 2 years ago on Boston when he was an all-star, and Boston took, I think, LeBron and Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals to 7 games without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward. Al Horford was a great part of that. Part of that is just because he's older. He was already starting to get up there in age when he was on Boston, and he's a year older, he's a step slower, and that's evident this year with the 76ers. His contract is really bad. This is a L for Elton Brand, the GM or president of the 76ers. He's going to be getting paid $30 million a year for the next 4 years. Well, this year and the next 3 years, because it was a 4-year contract. He's going to be getting paid $30 million a year when he's 37 years old. And given that Al Horford's already lost a step and regressed a bit this year, that contract's just going to get a lot worse. We thought the Chris Paul contract was going to be bad, but Chris Paul is still balling out at his old age. He was an all-star this year, and he's led OKC to a, I think, 60 in the West, the tough Western Conference. Al Horford's not going to lead a team ever again in his career, and it already looks like he's on the decline. So that contract is going to be really bad for the 76ers. Another weakness is not even his fault. He has to play out of position at power forward instead of center, with Embiid being down there. If they want to start Al Horford, they play him out of position at power forward instead of at center. And power forward is not a position he's played for most of his career. He's mostly, I think, like 95% of the time before this year with the 76ers, Al Horford played center. He played center in Atlanta with Paul Millsap at the power forward. He played center in Boston with, last year was Tatum at the power forward. And then I think 2 years ago, I forgot, they had, who was power forward? I think they had Amir Johnson playing power forward. Well, long story short, Al Horford is a player who thrives at center, and he's kind of out of position at power forward. His three-point shooting has regressed from his recent Boston days, and that's partly because he's had to shoot a lot more, because he's had to kind of adhere his game to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, two players who thrive and are at their best when they're at the rim. When you already have two players like that, and you bring in Al Horford, who's a player who, yeah, he's a great shooter for a big, but he still, most of his value comes when he's able to get the ball at the elbow and make a pass off a cut, or get the ball in the post from time to time when he has a favorable matchup and he can score down there. He's not a player that you want as your stretch four, because that doesn't unleash the value of Al Horford. And yeah, that's due to fit. 40% of his shots are coming from three-point land, and that's really a role that you wouldn't want Al Horford playing. Next player is Josh Richardson. Strengths, great perimeter defender. Metrics reflect that. The 76ers have a 2.7 better defensive rating with him on the court. He's a good playmaker. In Miami last year, he got 4 assists per game. This year is 3.1 assists per game, but that's good for like your third or fourth playmaker on the team behind Ben and Al Horford and Joel Embiid from time to time. He's a solid three-point shooter in the past. This year his three-point shooting has taken a step back, but he's somebody you don't want to just give an open look to. He's an average shot creator. 35% of his field goals are unassisted, and you kind of want more shot creation when you have Ben Simmons on the floor. More shot creation on the perimeter when you have Ben Simmons on the floor, and 35% of his field goals being unassisted suggests that he can get his own shot from time to time. Now, weaknesses, his shooting hasn't been as great this year at 32.7% from three, which is really bad. Not the percentage itself isn't really bad, but when you're playing with Ben Simmons, a player who does not take threes, Embiid, a player who wants to be on the low block, Al Horford, a player who is a solid three-point shooter for a big, but a player who you would get the most value out of when he's at the low block, when he's at the elbow. And then you add a player like Josh Richardson, who's been a league average type of three-point shooter in the past, but now he's regressed to 3 percentage points or 2 percentage points. I forgot. I think league average is either 35 or 36% from three. Nevertheless, he isn't shooting league average this year from three. That's not a recipe for team success with the players already that I've named on this team. He has never really been the most efficient scorer. He's shooting 43% from the field this year. And sadly, the advanced metrics suggest that the 76ers are better on offense with him off the court. I mean, it's not even that sizable of a difference. It's only half of an offensive rating point, but it is still negative nonetheless. Next player I want to get to is Furkan Korkmaz. His strength, he's a sniper. That's really the only listed strength I have for him. I just know that he's been lighting it up from three, and Philly is kind of in love with Furkan Korkmaz. I think he has the nickname Fergie or something like that. And I think I saw one game against the Bulls, he just went off. He was hitting everything. And he, from time to time, he was able to drive and get his own shot because he's pretty big for a two guard. That's kind of where they play him most of the time. Two guard and small forward. So when he got inside, he's able to convert a couple layups. But his strength is he's a sniper from downtown. 40% from three on 5 attempts a game. That's exactly what Philly needs. And he's still young. I think he's only 22 years of age. And I think he's going to be a free agent this offseason. The 76ers need to bring him back, because if there's one thing that the 76ers need, it's shooting. And Furkan Korkmaz provides that. They need to prioritize bringing him back due to his youth and due to his shooting. Next player is Matisse Thybulle. I really liked seeing him play whenever I got the chance to watch. He is a great defender. He's a player who most of the year he didn't even start. But the 76ers had a defensive rating of 2.4 points better when he was on the court. He's also a disruptive defender. That's why his nickname is the Disruptor, I think. 1.4 steals per game and 0.7 blocks per game as a wing player in limited minutes as a rookie is incredible. Per 36, he gets 2.3 steals per game and 1.3 blocks a game. Shows his disruption ability. He's a league average 3-point shooter at 35% flat from 3, and he's young. He's a rookie this year. In my opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinion, he has the potential to become one of the better perimeter defenders in the league, possibly even all NBA caliber type of defense. If he can get a shot, he could be really valuable in this league as a 3-and-D player in a league that's gravitating to more and more 3-and-D type of players on your wing that you would want to have on your team. Matisse Thybulle can really fill into that role. He's like on that Robert Covington type of path, a player who was on the 76ers in the past. Weaknesses is that Matisse is only league average from 3. It's only a weakness because he's on the 76ers, the team that needs more players who shoot above league average from 3. And he hasn't really shown much offensive game outside of catch and shoot threes, but that's fine. Being on a team with 3 players that you would really want the ball in the hands of to create for 3-and-D type of players on the perimeter, and Ben Simmons, Al Horford, and Embiid. Another weakness is he fouls quite a bit. He averages 4 fouls a game per 36 minutes, but that's expected for a disruptive defensive player and a rookie who's still kind of learning the game. So those were the players I wanted to break down. I see we're 29 minutes in on my recording, and I haven't even gotten into the direction of the 76ers, so let me just make this snappy. Direction. They're contending. Even though they're tied for 5th in the East, they are contending. Make no mistake about it, they still have 2 of the top 25 players in the league, in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, in which both players are still young and still can improve. And one of those players, Ben Simmons, has a lot of room to grow. He can add a 3-point shot, he can add some mid-range shot creation, get a bit of a tighter handle. The league should be afraid of what Ben Simmons can do when he eventually adds a 3, because he's going to have to add a 3 in this new age NBA. So yeah, they are contending because they have 2 of the top 25 players in the league, and they're stuck with I don't want to say bad contracts, because they're stuck with Tobias Harris and Al Horford, who just got their bags last season. Tobias Harris got a 5-year, like $120-something million deal, and Al Horford got a 4-year, $100-something million deal. They're not bad players to be stuck with, but given that those contracts are so big for the caliber of players that Tobias Harris and Al Horford are, this is going to be the core for the 76ers of the foreseeable future. Also, I want to dive into the idea of trading one of Embiid and Simmons. In my opinion, that's not the right move. Players of that caliber and that potential of Ben Simmons and Embiid, they do not grow on trees. And when you have them on the same team, you gotta find a way to make that work. There's too much talent between the two of them for them not to make it work somehow. Which leads me to my next point in coaching. Brett Brown, he's gotta go. He's done a good job in terms of getting the 76ers into being a perennial playoff team. I think he was the coach at the start of the quote-unquote process. But yeah, I think he's reached his ceiling as a coach in terms of what he can get out of the Ben Simmons Joel Embiid duo. And in my opinion, they need to somehow target a coach that can there's got to be a coach out there. You need to get a coach out there that can get more out of them when they're on the floor together. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And they got to get a coach someone that can actually get Ben Simmons to take a 3 a game. Because Brett Brown, in an interview, said, I think it was before the season started, he told Ben Simmons that he wanted him to shoot at least a 3 a game. And I think Ben Simmons has taken a grand total of like 5 threes this year. And they got to get a coach who will hold these players accountable. And by these players, I mean Joel Embiid. Because, like I said, Joel Embiid is a player who is kind of inconsistent in terms of not work ethic, but effort or intensity that he brings to a game. Like, he'll go a week span of dropping 28, 14, and 3 blocks a game, and then the next 2 games will be averaging like 15 points, 7 boards, and he just doesn't look engaged. They got to get a coach who can hold Joel Embiid accountable to when he's not playing well. You know, somebody that can keep Joel Embiid engaged at all times. I want to talk about Al Horford and what they should do with him. Obviously, they cannot trade him. That contract is untradeable. He's going to have to come off the bench with Tobias Harris starting at the 4, at the power forward position, because Tobias Harris is really bad at defending small forwards and defending on the perimeter in general. He's average, he's mediocre at defending power forwards, and power forward is becoming the position in the league that is less and less focused on actual shot creation. Power forward is becoming a position where you put small forwards at to be a stretch 4, a 2-way shooting power forward, like your Jeremy Grants, your Paul Millsap, this new older Paul Millsap. He's just a player who defends well across the board and can provide floor spacing. Same with Jeremy Grant, Robert Covington, PJ Tucker. That's what the power forward position is turning into. Tobias Harris having to guard those type of players at the power forward position is kind of ideal. That's the type of player you want Tobias Harris having to guard. That's a player that you can hide Tobias Harris his defensive woes. You can hide that defensive downside on those type of players. So having Tobias Harris at the power forward, you insert Matisse Thybulle at the small forward position, a defender, a disruptor. Yeah, I think that's the move that the 76ers have to make. Being paid $30 million to come off the bench, yeah, not ideal. You don't want to be paying a bench player $30 million a year. Still though, I think that is the best move for the 76ers' success in the future. This is another reason why I think this is a better move, because Al Horford is a player who plays best at the center position when he's on the floor. When you have him next to Joel Embiid has to be the center, and Al Horford has to play power forward, which is putting him out of position, limits his value. You bring him off the bench as your 6th man. He can play a lot of minutes at center because Joel Embiid, he's never really going to be in that peak conditioning. I think at most Embiid will play 32 minutes a night throughout an entire year, which leaves 16 minutes for Al Horford to play at center. And I'm not saying that Al Horford only has to play at center in the game. You can get away with playing 8 minutes of Al Horford and Embiid together on the floor. But what I'm saying is you want to get the most out of Al Horford possible, and that's Al Horford at center. 16 minutes of Al Horford at center a night, then 8 minutes at Al Horford at power forward. That's 24 minutes a night for Horford, which isn't a bad amount of playing time for him. And also, this is another reason why y'all brought in Al Horford when Joel Embiid eventually gets injured, or if y'all go to the load management route and you just want to rest Joel Embiid for a game or 2. You have Al Horford, just slot him in at center. It'd be perfectly fine. And like I said, having Al Horford at power forward with Embiid, playing him like 8 minutes a night at that position, that's a killer defensive lineup. And maybe that's the lineup you go to in the last 5 minutes of the 4th quarter of a close game. I alluded to this, but they need to figure out how to manage Embiid, either limit his minutes or they may have to load manage him. In terms of off-season moves or maybe trades that may come available throughout the course of next season, they need to emphasize adding as much shooting to this current team as possible, adding players like Furkan Korkmaz and developing Furkan Korkmaz on the defensive end so that he can play more minutes a night, because his shooting is exactly what Philly needs. And then you have another young wing player in Matisse Thybulle, who's already a great defender, on pace to becoming an all-NBA caliber defender. You can get him to shooting like 37% from 3. That's another thing that Philly needs. They need players that can shoot above league average from 3, that don't need the ball in their hands. They already have Furkan Korkmaz, who can do that, shot 40% from 3 this year. Develop him on the defensive side of the ball so he can play more minutes. They have another wing that shot league average from 3. He's younger, first year in the league, already a great defender. Get him to becoming a 37% shooter from 3, and boom, you got 2 shooters either off the bench or in your starting lineup in Matisse Thybulle and Korkmaz, players that can be the core of this team going forward, because Matisse Thybulle is on his rookie deal for the next 3 years, and then you add or you bring back Furkan Korkmaz on a 3 to 4 year deal, making like $8 million a year. You got 3 years plus of 2 young wings providing shooting for your team. In my opinion, the 76ers are the most talented team in the East, player for player. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to say that they definitively have the most talent in the East, player for player, but you can argue on every team. It's arguable that the 76ers have the most talent in the East, player for player. It's just fit. The fit really doesn't let the talent unleash itself. Doesn't let these players thrive and show the best side of themselves. Embiid is already one of the best scoring centers in the league. Simmons will eventually develop a respectable 3 ball that will make life easier for him and make life easier for Embiid. When I say it will make life easier for Simmons, it will basically unlock his game. He can already get to the line, or he can already get to the rim and finish at the rim incredibly without a shot. Imagine him with one. Like, you see Giannis, he has a threat of a 3-point shot. You still don't want Giannis coming inside, but you still don't want to leave him wide open for 3. That allows him to get to the rim a lot easier. Simmons will eventually add that 3, I'm pretty sure. In this league, you're going to have to add that 3-point shot. He'll develop some aggression getting older, and he's eventually going to have to become the go-to bucket getter on the perimeter, surpassing Tobias Harris for that role. Sure, the fit isn't great, but I do think that there is a coach that can make the Simmons and Embiid duo work and turn that team into perennial title contenders for years to come. That's going to do it for today's video. If you did enjoy, leave a like, and until next time, it's been your boy IB. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.